November 2017 edition of City Connection. It's the live call-in program where you, citizens of Grand Rapids, can ask Mayor Bliss about local issues. I'm with Community Media Center Linda Gellasch, and joining Mayor Bliss today is from Habitat for Humanity of Kent County. It's BriAnne McKee. That'll be in the second segment of the show. We'll hear a little bit about Plaza Roosevelt and the work that Habitat Kent is doing around affordable housing. And then you'll have opportunity to take part in the second half of the show. You'll be able to talk with, ask questions of BriAnne McKee with Habitat for Humanity, as well as the mayor, and some general questions after that. So here's how you do that. You can give us a call at 616-459-4881. Email works. It's cityconnection@grcmc.org. Twitter is at GRTV Access, and then GRTV's Facebook page. We are doing this live here on GRTV Community Media Center's channel 24 and streaming on therapidian.org. Mayor Bliss, welcome to the November show.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here.
A lot been going on, very, very busy. We're actually on the eve of an election, so it's always good to start out with some great election information in terms of polling, what's on the ballot, if you want to see your ballot, that sort of thing. So help out with that.
Yeah, thank you. Tomorrow is a big election day. We have some local issues that we're asking people to remember to get out and vote on. So if you are in the 3rd Ward, we have a city commission race. And then we have 3 ballot questions on the ballot tomorrow, one for library, one for transit, and one for GRPS bond millage. And then we also have comptroller, although our comptroller, it's a citywide race, is unopposed. And so, yeah, it's really important to get out and vote. If you're not familiar with where to vote, you can go to the city website. You can punch in your address and pull up your polling location. So that's right on the clerk's web page. Just hit under current voting information. And then you can also pull up an example ballot. So if you're not really sure what you're walking into and what it looks like, you can pull up a copy and you can look at that ahead of time. That's always available, and our clerk is really great about doing that. She's also worked really hard to look at polling locations, for polling locations where we've had trouble in the past or issues with having it be accessible. You know, she'll make changes and make sure that we have a great place where everyone can access and it's easy to find.
Okay, and you're in the midst, or the city's in the midst of doing all kinds of new things tech-wise. The website has been changing, so this would be a great way to jump in and say a little bit about that.
Yeah, we have been working really hard to redo our website and make it truly customer-driven. And that's been a process, about a year-long process so far. We've been rolling out web pages as we get them up and going. We've had a lot of what we call user testing. So we have a lot of people in the community that are helping us. So we put out the website, they go in and test it. They'll find issues with it, and we'll try to fix them right away. Our new website is available in English and Spanish, which is great. And so, yeah, one of the big things that we did was we collaborated. The team at 311 worked with our city treasurer, and now you can go online and pay all of your bills in one place, whether it's your water bill, refuse bill, income tax, property tax. It's a really easy format. It's interactive, it's kind of fun, funny. But yeah, and if you have any problems with that, you can just call 311 and they will help you.
That's what they're for.
That's what they're for.
All right. Another thing I wanted to mention that you and I had briefly discussed right before we went on air is the Racial Equity Initiative, and that's launching.
It is. So you probably remember this earlier in the year. I was so excited to get funding from the Kellogg Foundation, which provided funding to assist with launching a community-wide racial equity initiative. And part of that was to identify some expertise to come in and assist with facilitation of that. So we are working with the National Equity Project, 2 facilitators through their work. And then we invited community members from every sector. So this is the initiative that Dr. Bill Pink from GRCC is co-chairing with me. But really we're doing it in partnership with a number of individuals and really community partners. So we have individuals from business sector and nonprofit sector, public sector coming together and looking at what are we each individually doing, how do we align the work that we're doing, and then how do we set some community-wide goals really specific to the city of Grand Rapids to address the racial disparities that exist. So we had our first gathering at the end of October, a day-long session that was really just setting the foundation for that work. And then our next meeting is in December, and that will continue for 18 months.
Tell a little bit, and then you did kind of name the kinds of things that you'd like to measure, try to mark along the way, but tell a little bit, does each month have a step goal part of it? And how do you know at the end of 18 months there's been success, or does that mean the beginning? Or?
Yeah, so we are actually going to do that together.
Okay.
So our first meeting was really about setting the foundation, learning some history, getting to know one another, but also the different work that everyone is doing. And then at our next meeting in December, we'll start looking at that. So what are some of our concrete things that we want to address, but also what are those metrics, those really key metrics that we want to hone in on. But we're going to do that collectively as a body. I want to be really mindful about not going in and saying this is what we're doing, but really have it be driven by the collective.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing a lot more on that. We do want to catch up on where things are on policing. There's been a lot of study, and even as far back as when the traffic study happened, but where do things stand with policing and looking at that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We continue to work with the consultant team from 21st Century. We have a great team of people, both community members and individuals from our police department working together. They've had their third meeting, and they've structured how they're going to start reviewing policies and procedures and practices. In December, we will have a community meeting where the members of the committee, of the task force, as well as members from 21st Century will be present in the community giving updates, answering questions. So the structure of it is that they meet monthly, and then there's work being done in the subcommittees. But then every quarter there will be a community report out, but also a process where the community can ask questions and get additional information. So we'll have, I don't think the date has been set yet, but it will be coming up and we'll get the word out real soon.
Okay, great. And I know I'm taking through these really fast.
No, that's okay.
The other thing I want to ask a little bit about is the recognition of Rosa Parks Circle, kind of noted by planning organizations that recognize it as one of the top 15 in the nation. And tell a little bit what that means.
Yeah, so this was a tremendous honor for our city. So this is a national organization. They look at public spaces throughout the country, and then they identify the top ones. And it is through the planning, I think their acronym is American Planning Association, APA. And so they came, and they came to the city. We had a big celebration just a couple weeks ago on a Saturday, and they highlighted not just the design of Rosa Parks Circle, but also how it's become a really critical and pivotal location, public space in our city, and it's a gathering place for the community to come together, and also looking at how it's been used in a variety of ways to bring people together, and how it's really transformed the heart of our city. I mean, I don't know if people remember what that space was like before it was designed. I mean, even highlighting that it was a design created by Myelin is really amazing. And so they talked about all of those different aspects of it, and then honored the Fry Foundation. The Fry Foundation was a big proponent of redeveloping that space and was critical in even bringing in Myelin to the city of Grand Rapids, and so they honored them as well.
As much as you can fill us in a little bit about the history of that, because I don't remember what that space looked like before, and just a little bit about what was the original goal, if there's been even more than was envisioned to how that space is being used.
Oh, you know, I wish I had pictures. I remember what it was like, but it was kind of this kind of closed off space a little bit. It had, I wouldn't say it was dark, but it was much more closed. It wasn't nearly as open as it is today. And it was kind of this tucked away part in the city. I mean, this was even before the art museum. And so that whole section of the city just felt different. That kind of corner right there felt different. And so, you know, when the city decided they wanted to redevelop that space, they really thought bold, and they thought, how are we going to do this in a really creative way? And so they went through a process and brought in community members, and actually Fry Foundation assisted in raising the money and creating the space. And I think the intent, I wasn't a part of this because it was before my time even serving on the commission, but I believe the intent was to have it really become this focal point in the city and have it be open yet beautiful, and really the circle of bringing people together. And I think that's what it's done.
So, you know, as the city looks at other public spaces around, I mean, anything, obviously this is a great success. It's accomplishing what everybody would want, because it does open up that area of very, very tall buildings. But you do see the sky. You feel like it's open. You have a stage. You have a seating area where you can gather around, all of that. What about other spaces that are on the horizon?
Yeah, so we are working on a couple other spaces, really key spaces in the city, and one is the Calder. So we've spent a lot of time looking at kind of reimagining, revisioning the Calder. Calder, if you look at Calder as a whole, it's just over 4 acres of space. If you include the space in front of the city and county building, as well as the space along the side. So we went through this pretty extensive process. We have some great ideas and visions for that space. The hope is to, down the road, we have like a phased-in approach because it's expensive, but we're looking at how can we really create a space at Calder that is better utilized. We know that there's a lot of opportunities for festivals, but how else can that space be utilized? Right now, if you look out, it's a sea of concrete. It's not very shady. You don't see a lot of people sitting out there in the summer. It's not very inviting and welcoming. And so in the first phase, we're looking at, can we add some shade? Can we add some more permanent seating? Can we even potentially add a space for a stage? And can that space be used for concerts so that Rosa Parks isn't the only location? Although Annapolis has become that as well. Rosa Parks still tends to be the primary location for concerts, outside concerts downtown. So can Calder become another space or a secondary space? So we're looking at that. Also looking at Lion Square, so redeveloping Lion Square and looking at how that can be a better utilized public space. And that ties in with the work we're doing around the river. And then North Monroe, the city received funding from the MDNR Trust Fund to purchase some property, the property there along the river, just on the other side of 131. And again, thinking about how that space can be used in a really creative way to be a gathering place for people. So I think those are probably some 3 big spaces that potentially you'll see redeveloped over the next 5 to 10 years.
Just the one we've been hearing a lot about is Calder, and what is the timeline on that one?
Yeah, that's tricky. So we have some initial engineering because it's on the top of a parking garage, so everyone knows there's parking underneath. Even though it's considered park space up top, it's kind of tricky. And then we have to work in partnership with the county because that's a shared space between the city and the county. So right now what we're doing, we have the original, or I'd say the final designs, and now we're looking at some engineering so that we can really drill down into the costs. But it'll probably be phased in. I mean, we'll probably, right now what we're looking at is what would it cost to redevelop that space right in front of kind of the county building side. So we want to maintain the Calder, where the Calder is, and make sure that we kind of hold true to the vision of Alexander Calder. And so you won't see a lot of encroachment close to the proximity of the Calder itself, the Grand Baptiste, but there's lots of opportunity around that.
Okay. So. Thanks for that. And then one more question before we hit our break in about a minute. The progress with Greg Sundstrom is retiring, long-term city employee and current city manager. I think the aim is for him to depart at the end of the calendar year. There's been some public input that was desired, and I even weighed in on that one. And where do things stand on that process?
Yeah, so we are moving ahead. You're absolutely right. We went through about a 3.5-week process to get community input. I know we've had well over 900 people weigh in and complete the survey, which is great. And they're individuals from throughout the community. And then we had, so GovHR is the consulting firm that we're using, and they also held smaller stakeholder meetings, face-to-face meetings with about 10 different groups. So those are all completed. And then we had an employee survey, so well over 200 employees weighed in and gave input. And so now GovHR is working on taking all of that feedback and creating a candidate profile. So they will do that, and they'll present that to the City Commission. City Commission will be able to weigh in and make changes. And then once the candidate profile is finalized, then they'll get that posted and they'll start recruiting. And then it'll probably be open for about 4 weeks. And then come January, we'll start interviews. And then there will be another, once we vet down and get down to a handful of final candidates, we'll have another community process where people will be able to weigh in on the final candidates. I anticipate Greg, actually, we're looking at extending his contract. He'll probably stay with us until January or February, just to make sure that there's a real smooth transition. And then we'll hopefully be able to make a decision and think about then onboarding the new city manager.
Great. Thanks for the update on that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, at our first break, we'll have BriAnne McKee with Habitat for Humanity of Kent County. After the break, we'll be right back.
The Wealthy Theater is Grand Rapids' local movie theater and performance center. Since 1998, it has been a host to nationally touring music groups, local theater performances, and a variety of community events. Today, the Wealthy Theater is not only a landmark community treasure with historic significance, but a pioneer in the infusion of technology and traditional theater. Underneath the elegance and classic sensibility that defines Wealthy Theater, there is a matrix of new technologies. The theater is completely digital and outfitted with cameras and microphones for concerts, theater and comedy troupes, speakers and lecturers, and so much more. Experience all that Wealthy Theater has to offer. And bring a friend. Be surprised by the Wealthy Theater.
How do you build a strong local food economy? Meet Chris. Chris is opening Osteria Rosa, a locally sourced Italian restaurant in a building brought back to life by 616 Development. But he doesn't know any local farmers to supply him with food year-round. This is Melissa. Melissa runs the Fulton Street Farmers Market and publishes a long list, even in the dead of winter, of available produce, meats, bakery goods, and more on the Rapidian. This is Amy. Amy wants to do more to support the farmers in her local food economy. Amy talks to Melissa, who introduces her to farmers at the Fulton Street Farmers Market, and Amy, in turn, publishes their stories, also on the Rapidian. Chris hears about the Rapidian and now has access to a local grocery list and information that he needs to make connections with local farmers. He feeds his patrons with local food year-round. Connections multiply. Meals are shared. A stronger local food economy is built.
All right, and we are back with BriAnne McKee, who is with Habitat for Humanity. She is the executive director. And I'm so glad you're here for a number of reasons. One, I'm a big fan of Habitat.
Thank you.
So years ago, I used to volunteer quite a bit when I had time on my hands, but also just the incredible work that you're doing in the community. And more recently, this year, we partnered up with Habitat and my mayor's millennial group, and we helped work on a house right here on the west side, which was such a great day. And I love that so many people step up and give back to the community and do service projects, and that was really a tremendous day. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Bliss, for having me. I'm excited to talk a little bit about what Habitat's up to, and I agree with you. I say all the time that we get to see the best in people every day when they come out and volunteer for perfect strangers, people they may have never met, to ensure that they have safe and stable housing. So it's a real privilege to be here to talk about Habitat's mission and our work.
Awesome. So for people who aren't familiar with Habitat, why don't we start with that?
Sure.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the organization? Because I know you do more than just help with those housing projects?
Yes, absolutely. So Habitat is a nonprofit affordable homeownership provider. We have been fortunate enough to be in the Grand Rapids community for almost 35 years. Next year we'll celebrate our 35th anniversary. And we have served over 400 families with an affordable mortgage. And the criteria mainly is that families have a need for housing, an ability to pay a mortgage, and a willingness to partner with us, which means that they're willing to contribute their time and energy through something that we call sweat equity, which really is just their partnership demonstrating their time and talents. They contribute hours out on the construction site to help build their own home, but then they also go through a very in-depth and empowerment-based education curriculum to make sure they're the most equipped and informed home buyer possible. And we do all of this work primarily with volunteers who help us come out and build and construct our homes every year. So it's a beautiful thing, and we're very, very fortunate that the folks of Grand Rapids have really gotten behind our mission and helped us serve those 400 families.
Yeah, so nice. And if I remember right, you also help once they're homeowners, right? So even I remember when I bought my house, and at the time I had no idea what a lateral was until my basement flooded because my lateral line was backed up, and I had a pilot light go off on my furnace and had no idea what to do. So you also help homeowners once they're in the home as well, kind of know the basics of home ownership.
Absolutely. So we want to ensure that when the furnace filter needs to be changed, or the batteries in the fire alarm, or how to turn on a lawnmower when you're out mowing your lawn. So we have a very robust set of educational classes that we ask our homeowners to go through while they're going through the home buying process. And all the time they spend in those classes, they're also securing those sweat equity hours. So they're getting something from it, but also giving of their time and energy as well. And then for those homeowners who live in the surrounding areas where we're building our homes, who might just need a little bit of a hand up in terms of TLC on their home. Maybe they need a new roof, windows, furnace, anything to extend the life and longevity from a health and safety standpoint for a home. We partner with existing homeowners in that way with repairs as well, which is really great.
Yeah, that is great. So funny, as you said that, I'm like, I have to change my furnace filter.
It's this time of year when the clocks change. You have to change your furnace filters and your batteries and your fire alarms. Yes.
So you took me there. I'm like, oh, I have to add that to my list.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit though about. So sorry.
That's okay.
I digress.
No.
So let's talk about people who are interested in having a Habitat home. Like, how do they do that? How do they apply? I know in the past when I've talked to you, there's a list, a waiting list for that, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So we have a pretty robust application process because folks are applying for a mortgage. So one of the biggest myths about Habitat is that we give our houses away, and that couldn't be further from the truth. And so because folks are applying for a mortgage, we do a really robust analysis of their financial capability. We do work with folks who are in the low to moderate income range. So for example, a family of 4 with an income around $45,000 on an annual basis. So folks can go online, they can pop into our office, they can call our office, habitatkent.org or 774-2431 to ask some initial questions about what that application process looks like. And then we walk through, once we know that they meet their eligibility criteria, we have a home visiting process with our selection committee that kind of talks about what does it mean to go through the Habitat homeownership process. It's a long and lengthy process, all those classes that I talked about, the sweat equity component. So we really want to make sure that it's a two-way partnership and that both parties know what they're getting into. And then once they meet that process, they actually get offered properties to say, these are the homes that we're offering up right now. Are you interested in purchasing one of these? So it's a long and kind of arduous process, but it's really because we want to ensure this is a lifetime commitment, oftentimes, that our families are making. And so we want to make sure it's the right one, that it's a fiscally responsible one for them, and that we're doing everything we can to set them up for success. In terms of the need, we don't keep or maintain a wait list per se, but what we do is we have rounds when we're getting ready to open up and offer up those homes to folks who have met that application process. We often will send out 900 to 1,000 applications for folks who have called to inquire about our process, and at any given time we're offering up 7 to 15 homes. So that demonstrates the need on how many homes we're able to offer based upon the number of folks who are interested in that process. Wow. It's significant.
So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I want to at least highlight that you have a real commitment to vets. So you've done veteran builds, you've also done women builds, and more recently, I should say over the last couple of years, you've been really active in certain neighborhoods and have really targeted some of your efforts, including on the west side, but also over in Roosevelt Park.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about Plaza Roosevelt?
Yes, absolutely. So we have been, our office is located in the Roosevelt Park neighborhood, and we have built over 60 homes in that neighborhood in our 35-year history. And we have had the really good fortune of engaging in relationships with neighbors and residents who live in Roosevelt Park. And as we've been acquiring and purchasing land in the community and in the neighborhood, we really wanted to take a step back and say, let's ask the neighbors what they see. What are the hopes and dreams for their neighborhood? Roosevelt Park is very close to the downtown area. It's along the Granville Avenue corridor between Wealthy and Clyde Park. And it's one of the affordable neighborhoods in our downtown city center or close to the city center. So we know that it's at risk for changing very drastically, and so we want to ensure that folks have an ability to access not only housing, but what other amenities make a neighborhood strong. And what we heard in our resident feedback was people want access to educational opportunities, to expanded healthcare opportunities, opportunities for local business people to expand or grow the businesses that are along the corridor. So in addition to housing that Habitat will be providing, we also have partnered with Dwelling Place, who will be providing affordable rental. Grand Rapids Public Schools is building a new high school, and Clinica Santa Maria will be expanding their clinic, and then there's also going to be some retail space for some additional programs and services that the residents spoke of, in addition to a really amazing green space and park space, which was really important when we connected with the residents. So we're really excited about it. It's been a pilgrimage, something a little bit different than Habitat has typically done, but really trying to hyper focus our building and repair and our resident leadership efforts around this broader Plaza Roosevelt project.
Yeah. So that's if people are not familiar with Plaza Roosevelt and where it is, it's how many acres again?
It's 5.5 acres of land, and it's on the corner on Granville Avenue between Graham and Franklin. So where Cook Avenue Arts and Humanities as well as Clinica Santa Maria are on the two corners, we kind of own the space in between. That's going to be redeveloped.
Nice.
Yeah.
I know we only have a couple minutes left, but you also were really instrumental and active in a recent area-specific planning process that happened in Granville. So Granville worked on an ASP, and we at the city, we adopted that ASP a couple months ago.
Hooray! Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Well, it was the neighborhood. I mean, it was just really a beautiful process, and the ASP is just really well done, and it captures the vision that neighborhood has for their future. Part of that was some zoning changes, so those came before the City Commission at our last meeting about 10 days ago, and those were approved as well. But do you want to talk just briefly about the experience? You were a part of that, but it was really this incredible collaborative effort from a lot of people in that community.
Absolutely. So the Roosevelt Park Neighborhood Association actually led that charge. And I think it's interesting for folks to know that an update to the city's master plan involves this thing called an area-specific plan. We wanted to call it something a little more fun, so we called it Viva la Avenida.
That's way more fun.
Which means long live the avenue, because Granville Avenue really is this key corridor in the Roosevelt Park neighborhood. But I think it demonstrates what's possible when residents are authentically engaged in saying, what do you love about your neighborhood? What do you wish there was more of? And then also, where are their challenges? And what can we collectively do together to make those challenges become opportunities? And what can we do to solve some of those challenges that are there? So now Viva la Avenida being passed really helps provide the guideline and the context for folks like Habitat who are building housing. We're building traditional single-family homes, like has traditionally been built in our city, but then there's parts within the corridor that it's more appropriate for there to be multi-family townhome-style housing. So that Viva la Avenida kind of provides that context and that framework while also ensuring that the core components of that neighborhood stay true to what it is. So I think it's really exciting. It shows what's possible when people can rally around a common cause and shows that the residents really have the ingenuity and the dedication and the commitment to their neighborhood to get involved in a process like that.
Yeah, it's like preserving the best of our history and building on the future.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, thank you for your work on that. It really was a great plan. I'm so glad it's passed, and now we can get to work pieces of that, give direction to the city. So
Yes.
we're working on what we need to do around infrastructure. Also, that the street right now is a state trunk line. We're trying to get that converted back to
Yes.
a local street, which will allow us to really make some of those changes that have been requested to make it a more pedestrian safe space.
Yes.
So there's a lot of work to be done, but having a plan and a vision in place helps provide that blueprint for the future.
Absolutely. If you don't have a plan, how do you know when you're working towards it? So it's a beautiful plan, and we were honored and delighted to be a part of it as well. So it's been a great experience. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So with that, we'll take a break, and when we come back together, we'll have some more questions.
Okay, sounds great.
All right.
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thank you.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
A community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
WYCE is a world of music. We aim to shine a light on underserved musical artists in a non-commercial format with no advertisements. Volunteers come in to create personalized music programming that broadcasts over the air at 88.1 FM to West Michigan and via the internet to listeners all over the world. These listeners sponsor our efforts, keeping WYCE independent and community-owned. Musicians use the station to broaden their audience and build support for their latest projects by submitting their music to be included in our broadcast and performing live in studio. Businesses find their customers through underwriting, nonprofits inform the community to their mission, and listeners stay informed about local events. We believe that music is a powerful force that creates quality relationships in our community, that speaks to our emotions, and provides the soundtrack to our lives.
Welcome back to City Connection Live on Livewire Channel 24. I'm Linda Gellasch with Mayor Rosalind Bliss, as well as BriAnne McKee with Habitat for Humanity. What a lot of information that was. It just made me more and more curious. And really the whole idea, you mentioned how long Habitat for Humanity has been invested and involved in that Roosevelt Park neighborhood. And I'm just wondering, you know, when you're taking all this detail from the stakeholders, the people that live there that really make up this neighborhood, and you're looking at transformation, moving ahead in a way that does preserve the character and how you really transform an area by doing that. Mayor, you had just made a comment a few minutes ago off air about how it really does feel like that neighborhood. Can you tell a little bit about how that happened?
Absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, it's recognizing that the people who live in the neighborhood have the answers about what a neighborhood should look and feel like and how it should grow and change. They're the ones that live their day-to-day lives there, and so how do you go to the very people who have the most direct experience with that? The other thing I think we've learned at Habitat is that it takes ongoing and consistent listening in a variety of methods and manners. So we've done things like formal meetings where we've asked, neighbors to come to our office and provide input and feedback and vote on various site plan concepts. But then we've also really partnered with the local schools to find out where are parents and neighbors already organically gathering. Are they at Southwest Community Campus or Chavez for a parent night, and how can we involve and engage residents in that way? So for instance, the latest iteration of the site plan, we literally put out on a table and had like puzzle pieces, and we asked the folks, the neighbors in the community, you put the buildings where you think they best fit, and you tell us where things should go, and should Rumsey Street stay closed or open? And then we had them present their plans and kind of give rationale and reasoning why. And not everything looks, today like it did then when we initially did that session, but we really got some great input and feedback from a variety of ages. And I think it's because we went to places where neighbors are organically gathering and going rather than, making them come to an extra meeting. So that's just one of the ways that we've utilized that feedback and that input.
Okay, and then you mentioning the fact that a lot of the materials that you're creating and putting out there and the way you're doing meetings is in more than one language.
Yes.
That it really does then make it accessible to the residents of the neighborhood in a lot of different ways. Are you seeing, not you specifically, but Habitat's been there 35 plus years. Are you seeing generations then involved in this transformation of this little area? Because, home ownership, it takes a generation for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have these incredible stories actually of women who have grown up in Habitat homes who I've met out in the community doing work here locally, who are now doing tremendous things, and they've come up to me and said, I actually grew up in a Habitat house. One of whom is a KSSN school social worker in the local neighborhood. Her mom's house is right around the street, and she talked about how her mom is the one who taught her about what it meant to clean up her credit and to get prepared, and she has a mortgage now with her husband and their son that she secured through a bank on her own. And the first person she thought of to ask about that process was her own mother. And we have multitudes of stories like that. We're also seeing that our homeowners are actually paying off their mortgages. So this summer we had a mortgage burning ceremony in our garden, and literally 4 families lit their former mortgages on fire because they had finished paying off their mortgages over a variety of length of time. So that's just such a tremendous thing that sometimes even just the general American doesn't do, pay off their home. And so to see Habitat families have that tremendous accomplishment is such a beautiful thing, and the freedom that then that gives to the next generation, and who knows what will happen then with the next generation.
That's a great story, for example. And then the idea then that was passed to another generation.
Absolutely.
So does Habitat actually provide the mortgage money? Then you hold these
yes.
mortgages? Okay.
So we hold the mortgage. The unique thing about it is a 0% interest mortgage. And so what that allows Habitat to do is really base that mortgage on a housing to income and debt to income ratio that's affordable for that family based upon their income. So we don't have a fixed term like when you go to a bank, they'll say, do you want a 15 or 30-year mortgage? We're more concerned with what are their monthly obligations, what's their housing and debt to income ratios, and how can we set those at a conservative and a rate that's affordable to them. So that 0% interest mortgage allows us to do really creative things with the length of the mortgage based upon and suited to the tailor of the needs of the family.
Interesting. Do you have a variety of sizes or values of houses that people can maybe be more appropriately fit with a particular note? If it's a huge house with a big family, you're sounds like you're totally willing to extend that as many years as it needs to be.
Absolutely. We typically go up to 30 years, and thankfully we've been able to do that based upon and we sell for appraised value. So, and then we tailor the size of the home and the number of the bedrooms based upon the family unit at the time of application when they come into the home. So yeah, we really try to ensure that this is a long-term fit for them and their family. We also, though, have had circumstances and situations where families have gotten a promotion or they've pursued higher education and they've sold their home and then, you know, chosen to move on to another neighborhood, and that is perfectly fine too. We just want to ensure that that long-term housing stability is something that remains, and then we would potentially purchase that home back and then sell it to another qualified Habitat homeowner, so we're ensuring that we're keeping it homeowner occupied in the neighborhood.
And is that always the case, that if a Habitat house is to be sold, the Habitat for Humanity has the first opportunity yet?
Yeah, we have the first right of repurchase.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And then tell me a little bit, the familiarity that I've had with the organization is knowing about the big work projects, but is it typically a remodel, a redo of a house, or is there sometimes a total build? And I think I've seen both.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the first maybe 25 years or so of our existence here in Grand Rapids, we were primarily doing new builds. And then when the Great Recession occurred, there were a number of really beautiful homes that were here and that were vacant, and they were blighting neighborhoods. And so instead of us continuing to build brand new, we said this is an opportunity for us to get into the business of rehabbing homes in addition to building brand new. So now we will do either. If we purchase a lot that has an existing structure or home on it, we always evaluate what is the most fiscally responsible thing to do. Sometimes rehabbing a home is more expensive than starting off from scratch and building brand new. But so we will do both, and we will do a gut rehab or maybe a partial rehab, just depending upon the quality of the home and the state of the home when we purchase it.
Well, I know we don't have it.
Can I add one other thing?
Yes.
Maybe even talk about how you've been really creative lately and even expanding that. And now you have the townhomes, like the fourplex here on the west side.
Yes.
Maybe just touch on that as well.
Yeah, so we're trying to ensure that we're speaking to a variety of typologies and needs as our city grows and evolves and changes. How can we provide multifamily style homeownership opportunities, townhome style homeownership opportunities? So the mayor's referring to a 4-unit project that we have on 4th Street right across from the Basilica, where 4 families will be purchasing those units. So we're trying to not only evolve our model based upon brand new or rehab, but also these new typologies as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we were talking a little bit before we came on air about the Granville Avenue neighborhood and a little bit about what's happening there, including upcoming high school.
Yes.
But talk a little bit more about the project there.
Yeah. So the project is called Plaza Roosevelt, and it is a neighborhood-driven, holistic project that really is going to involve educational, housing, healthcare, cultural and arts, as well as economic building opportunities within a neighborhood context. So it's literally a 2-block area along the Granville Avenue corridor, framed between Graham and Franklin. And it's going to involve a brand new GRPS high school that will educate 500 students, approximately 16 to 18 Habitat homes, and then approximately 50 affordable rental units as well, developed by Dwelling Place, and then an expansion of Clinica Santa Maria, the health clinic that's been in the neighborhood for many years, many generations. And then in addition, a very beautiful park space. That's one of the key pieces that we heard back from the residents, that they want green space in their neighborhood and safe spaces for multi-generations to be able to gather and enjoy the project, whether or not they actually live or go to the high school or go to the clinic, that green space is a safe gathering space for families within the neighborhood to enjoy.
Okay. Well, we do have one question that's specifically for you, and then I'll let you wrap up with maybe ways to volunteer, but let's get this one out there real quick, and it's from Tom, and it says, if a neighbor has a complaint about how a housing project has turned out, how is that dealt with?
Absolutely. So I would ask that they give me a ring directly, and they can reach me at 774-2431. I'd be happy to connect with them about that. And then for folks who are interested in volunteering or getting involved in any of Habitat's projects, you can go to habitatkent.org, and there's a tab at the top for volunteering.
How many houses in the cycle right now?
Ooh, good question. We have approximately 13 houses that we're building this year, and again focused on that Roosevelt Park neighborhood area. And then we'll also be doing approximately 20 repairs, so owner-occupied homes that might need some repairs, in addition to many of the neighborhood block projects and resident leadership opportunities we hope to employ in the neighborhood as well.
Busy organization, not more than I ever realized.
And I want to do one more plug, and that is your commitment to environmental sustainability. So one of the goals is to build homes that are environmentally sustainable, but also ones that have where the families aren't burdened with significant utility costs. So what I love about your work, I love a lot of things about what Habitat does, but I really love that you also are thinking about all of those really specific pieces around building and making sure that you're building green.
Thank you. Yeah, we have built over 100 LEED certified homes. We were actually the first entity in the country to build an affordable LEED certified home. And that's really thanks in part to the amazing Logie Foundation, who really helped us think about how sustainability is important, especially in income-restricted neighborhoods. And in addition to this environmental savings, it also is significant utility savings for the families as well. So that's been an amazing journey and partnership that we've had. So thanks for pointing that out. We appreciate that.
You are a leader in this space. So
well, it's a pleasure.
Great information. Great to meet you. BriAnne McKee, Executive Director with Habitat for Humanity here in Kent County. Gave you that phone number if you have any questions as well.
Yes.
So welcome to the show, and thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And City Connection will be right back after this break.
How do you build a greener city? Meet Mariah. Mariah cares about the environment in her neighborhood and wants to get the word out about an upcoming tree planting event at Congress School, organized by Friends of Grand Rapids Parks and Brewery Vivant. She knows thousands of people will find out about it if she publishes the story on the Rapidian. Meet John. John cares about the environment, but doesn't know what he can do locally to help. John's friends recommends he check the Rapidian for local events. John, like many other volunteers, finds Mariah's article and decides to go. Together, John, Mariah, Friends of Grand Rapids Parks, and Brewery Vivant help plant trees at their local neighborhood school playground. Community grows, beers are shared, a greener city is built.
WYCE is a world of music. We aim to shine a light on underserved musical artists in a non-commercial format with no advertisements. Volunteers come in to create personalized music programming that broadcasts over the air at 88.1 FM to West Michigan and via the internet to listeners all over the world. These listeners sponsor our efforts, keeping WYCE independent and community-owned. Musicians use the station to broaden their audience and build support for their latest projects by submitting their music to be included in our broadcast and performing live in studio. Businesses find their customers through underwriting, nonprofits inform the community to their mission, and listeners stay informed about local events. We believe that music is a powerful force that creates quality relationships in our community, that speaks to our emotions, and provides the soundtrack to our lives.
Welcome back to City Connection here on Community Media Center's GRTV Livewire Channel 24. Great visit with BriAnne McKee with Habitat for Humanity. Mayor, that has to fit in nicely with your goals for this community having to do with affordable housing. How does this organization plug into how you think things are moving forward?
Yeah, affordable housing, and we've talked about this before, continues to be an urgent, critical issue in our city. And as I've said before, we cannot solve this problem alone at the city. I mean, our ability and what we have authority over when it comes to housing is pretty limited. And so we have to have really key partnerships in the community, like with Habitat, but also with the other nonprofit housing development corporations, as well as the private sector, private developers. And so we formed the Housing Advisory Committee, and there was representation from the nonprofit world and the private sector and the city, and BRI served on that. And so Habitat is definitely a piece of this really complex puzzle, and they play an important role in the community at ensuring and providing affordable housing in partnership, as I said, with a number of others.
So when we're talking about partnerships in the community, the city was just awarded a $300,000 grant for basically a number of nonprofit funders came together. Is that how that worked for, I'm missing the term
Eviction
right now,
Prevention
Eviction Prevention
Court. Yes, yeah. So this is, I'm so happy about this. And we just announced this last week, and really it is because of generous foundations, Seal Case Foundation and the Community Foundation. But this really came out of a discussion that started back in January. So you may remember Matthew Desmond was here. He wrote the book Evicted. He was here as a part of January series. After he spoke, a small group of us got together and we were able to spend some time with him. And we started to really look at the impact of evictions on families and the community. What was the scope of the problem in our community? And then from that discussion, a number of folks in the community continue those conversations, looking at what can we do around evictions? What can we do to prevent evictions? And Connie Bohach at the city was part of those conversations, as well as individuals from the county, from DHHS, and from our 61st District Court, which is where when a family, when the landlord goes to evict a family, they have to go to court. And so we looked at what are some best practices around the community, around the state really, and the country. And then we looked to other eviction courts. So this is we're not the first. We actually are learning from other communities who have eviction courts. And we said we really need to do that here, that we have roughly 1,000 evictions throughout the community every year, and can we be proactive and work with a family before an eviction to try to prevent the eviction from happening and create stability in that family's life. And so we, with this partnership, what we'll be doing is we'll be working with a number of organizations, including DHHS and some nonprofits, to provide supports to families before they get to court and have to go in front of a judge. And then we'll provide some trainings. There's a number of elements of the program. But I just want to applaud 61st District Court willing to take this on and pilot it and see if we can have a positive impact. But then also the community partners, the county, and then our community development department.
Wow, that's a great news, really, for this community to have that sort of support to do this.
Yeah, and we're gonna be collecting data. I'm very very committed to using data and looking at, are we having a positive impact, and making sure that we're able to tell that story. And then at the end of the pilot, we have to make the case on whether we've had a positive impact and whether the program should continue.
Okay. How long is the effort? I may have missed that when you.
So 3 years. We're looking at a 3-year pilot.
Okay. Well, kind of on the topic of housing, and a report came out today from Healthy Homes Coalition that wasn't really good news today. It's that the level of lead being detected in children for the past 2 years has jumped. It is not related like Flint to water, but to lead in housing. And there's been previous years when there's efforts to get lead out of housing, but just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that we saw a spike last year as well, and it's unbelievably disappointing that we continue to have more kids poisoned this year. You're absolutely right, it's from lead paint. It's highly concentrated in our neighborhoods that have the oldest housing stock, and that's consistent with data. We know that that's where often there's still lead paint. Very often, we had a hot summer, so windows going up and down and dust from lead paint in the air and children having contact with that. But there's a couple efforts going on. So there's currently a county-wide lead poisoning task force. Commissioner Salfeld put that in place, and that came from a larger conversation at the state level that I was actually involved in, looking at lead poisoning in children and saying, look, this is a really community-wide problem, and the health department is a key player in what we need to do to address lead poisoning in children. And so Commissioner Salfeld pulled together a countywide task force. Commissioner Lanier from our city commission is the city representative on that task force. They'll be working on creating a report on what we can do locally. And then also about a year ago now, my timing is sometimes off because time goes by quickly. But the city, we were successful in getting a $2.6 million HUD grant specifically to focus on lead remediation. So we're doing that in partnership with Healthy Homes of West Michigan, and so we're in the midst of doing that, and then also we're continuing to look at what else we can do, what other resources we have. It's education, it's abatement. It's also trying to be more proactive with families' education, like educating them about the dangers.
And at some point the hope is that this is solved, this is settled,
Yes.
It's gone, there's no longer lead paint being used or made.
Right.
So the spike, did an effort end? Did something conclude? Why did it spike for these past 2 years?
Yeah, there's so there's theories around that. Sometimes it's hard to know for sure. But a couple theories. One is that people are starting to do rehabs. So when you go into a home and you do a rehab and you disrupt lead paint, there's more dust in the air. We hope contractors use lead abatement practices or lead poisoning practices when they're doing construction, but that's not always the case. And then also, the weather sometimes, whether, like I said, if it's hotter and there's lots of windows opening up and down, sometimes that can be, a lot of the lead poisoning is actually from the windows. That's where you get a lot of the lead dust, both on the outside of the window, in the soils, but also in the house. So that could be part of it. It could be a number of things. It's just, it's also testing. So we're testing more children. So that could be it as well. Maybe it's just being detected more. Could be a combination of those different factors.
Okay. Thanks for digging in a little bit deeper on that one.
Yeah.
Something we discussed just before we came back on air was the idea of Grand Rapids becoming an age-friendly city and how that could even tie to housing a little bit, but talk about that.
Yeah, so we embarked probably about 7 weeks ago, on going through a number of, I believe 17, we have 17 different community meetings scheduled, talking about what can the city do to be a more age-friendly community. And that's very specific on what that means. So there's the World Health Organization. They've been talking about age-friendly cities for some time now. The AARP has taken this up and made it a core program that they're advocating for cities to look at what are you doing to be an age-friendly city. And then there's a very specific process that you can go through as a city to assess where are you right now as an age-friendly city and what do you need to change or do differently to be more age-friendly. So we're in the process of getting community input. Under the designation or certification of an age-friendly city, they look at 8 different things, one of them being housing, right? How do we ensure that as you age, you can age in place? But it also looks at things like walkability and pedestrian safety and transportation and access to social connections to prevent isolation. So there's a number of different components. But specifically at housing, how do we look at housing and really think about housing through a lifetime? So not just for families, not just for millennials or talent attraction or workforce housing, but also as people age in place. How do we make sure that that's available in our community? So we had the community meetings. We'll be wrapping those up. We'll be looking at the feedback. We'll be working with our partners at AARP as well as Area Agency on Aging, and then looking at what we need to do, whether we're going to apply to become a certified age-friendly city, and then that starts a 3-year process of analysis, assessment, and then making changes to meet criteria. And so we'll be continuing that conversation. But it's an important conversation, and it needs to be a priority.
Great information. Great way to close out the show. We'll call it a day, and we'll be back next first Monday of the month, December, I believe that's the 5th or so. City Connection. It airs live on GRTV's Livewire Channel 24. I'm Linda Gellasch with Mayor Bliss. We'll see you next month.